A vast world existed, without the kind of cities we usually imagine. It moved without loud markers of power, without towering walls or crowded streets. And yet, across forests, plains, rivers, and mountains, millions of people lived full and complex lives, woven into the land in ways that left only a soft imprint behind. It is a presence that feels both near and distant, something that once filled the continent with quiet motion and now rests just beneath the surface of memory. If you were to stand there long before unfamiliar sails touched distant shores, you would not feel the absence of civilization. Instead, you might notice a different kind of fullness. The air would carry the scent of trees and water, the slow rhythm of wind moving through leaves, and somewhere, faintly, the presence of people, not dominating the land, but moving within it. Their lives were not separate from the world around them. They were part of its quiet pattern. There were no clear edges where human life ended and nature began. Villages did not announce themselves from afar. Paths were often subtle, shaped by repeated steps rather than imposed design. The land was not divided into rigid lines, but understood through memory, movement, and relationship. To live here was not to stand apart from the environment, but to exist as one thread within it, woven carefully over generations. In this world, time did not rush forward in straight lines. It moved in cycles, in the turning of seasons, in the return of animals, in the shifting light across the sky. Days were not measured by clocks, but by the slow unfolding of morning into afternoon and the quiet settling of evening into night. People woke with the land, moved with it, rested with it. Their rhythm was not imposed. It was shared. You might notice how little noise there is. Not silence exactly, but a softer kind of sound, the rustle of grass, the distant call of birds, the steady flow of a river finding its way across the earth. Human voices would be there too, but they would not overwhelm the space. They would blend into it, rising and fading like any other part of the landscape. Life was present, but it did not need to be loud to be complete. Across this vast land, there was not just one way of living. There were many, each shaped by its surroundings, each responding to the specific textures of place. In the dense forests, life moved differently than it did across the open plains. Near rivers, patterns followed the water. In the mountains, the rhythm changed again. And yet, despite these differences, there was a shared understanding, a quiet awareness of balance. People here knew the land not as something to conquer, but as something to understand. Knowledge was not written down in permanent marks, but carried in memory, in stories, in the repetition of actions passed from one generation to the next. A child would learn by watching, by listening, by doing, slowly absorbing the patterns that had already been refined over long stretches of time. Nothing felt rushed. There was no need to hurry what had already endured. The idea of ownership did not stand in the same way it might elsewhere. Land was not something to be held tightly in isolation. It was something to move through, to care for, to return to. There were territories, of course, and deep connections to specific places. But these connections were often understood through use, through respect, through presence, rather than fixed lines drawn across a map that did not yet exist. At night, the world would shift again. Fires would glow softly, casting light that flickered against faces and surroundings. Above, the sky would open wide, filled with stars that seemed closer in the absence of artificial light. The stories told beneath that sky were not just for entertainment. They carried knowledge, memory, and meaning, linking people to the past and guiding them into the future. But even then, the tone remained calm. Nothing needed to be forced. There is a tendency, much later, to look back at this time and search for something missing, to ask where the large structures were, where the visible signs of power stood. But standing here, in this quieter world, that question begins to feel misplaced. What existed was not incomplete. It was simply different in its expression. Less focused on permanence, more aligned with continuity. The land itself held much of what was needed. Forests provided shelter, food, and materials. Rivers offered movement, connection, and life. The plains stretched wide, supporting animals that moved in great herds. Each region carried its own possibilities, and people learned to read these possibilities carefully. Not everything was taken. Not everything was changed. There was an awareness that life depended on what remained as much as what was used. And so, existence here was not defined by constant expansion or accumulation. It was shaped by attention, by knowing when to act and when to wait, by understanding that survival was not about control, but about alignment. These ideas were not spoken as abstract principles. They were lived quietly in daily choices that repeated again and again, forming a stable pattern over time. If you listen closely, you can almost feel the continuity. Generations moving through the same spaces, adapting gently, learning slowly, refining what already worked. There is no single moment that defines this world. No sudden beginning or dramatic turning point. It is a long, steady presence, unfolding across thousands of years without needing to announce itself. And perhaps that is why it can feel difficult to see clearly from a distance. It does not leave behind the kind of traces that demand attention. It does not interrupt the land in ways that force recognition. Instead, it settles into it, becoming part of the background, part of the quiet foundation that everything else would eventually build upon. But if you stay here for a while, if you let your attention slow down and adjust to the rhythm, the presence becomes clearer, not through grand displays, but through small, consistent signs. A path worn gently into the earth, a place where a fire once burned, the faint structure of a shelter that blends into its surroundings. These are not absences. They are subtle expressions of a life fully lived. This was a world that did not need to prove itself through visibility. It existed because it worked, because it sustained itself across time, without breaking the balance that allowed it to continue. It was not static. It changed, adapted, responded. But it did so without losing its connection to the larger patterns that shaped it. And so, as we begin to move slowly through this landscape, there is no single story to follow, no central figure to focus on. Instead, there is a broad, quiet presence, a network of lives unfolding side by side, each connected to the land in its own way, yet all part of something larger that cannot be easily separated into parts. It is a world that asks you not to rush, not to search immediately for conclusions, but to observe, to notice, to allow the details to emerge gradually. Because here meaning is not delivered all at once. It is revealed slowly, in the same way it was lived. The land does not begin with people. It is already there, wide, patient, and quietly shaping everything that will come to exist within it. Long before footsteps trace familiar paths, before smoke rises gently into the air, the earth moves through its own rhythms, Forests grow and thin. Rivers shift their course. Winds travel across open spaces, carrying seeds, scents, and subtle change. To understand life here, you first have to notice the land itself, because it is the land that decides what is possible. Across this vast continent, there is no single environment. There is no one condition that defines the whole. Instead, the land unfolds in layers, each region holding its own character, its own pace, its own quiet demands. In some places, dense forests stretch outward, their canopies filtering light into soft patterns that shift with the hours. The ground beneath is cool, often hidden beneath fallen leaves and roots that weave slowly through the soil. In these forests, movement is careful. The trees stand close together, their presence shaping how people walk, how animals move, how sound travels. You do not see far ahead. You learn to notice small changes. A broken branch, a faint track, the way light touches the ground. Life here becomes attentive, guided by details that reveal themselves only to those who take the time to observe. Further outward, the land begins to open. The forests give way to wide plains that stretch toward the horizon. Here, the sky feels larger, more present. The wind moves freely, brushing across tall grasses that bend and rise in slow waves. There are fewer places to hide, fewer barriers between one point and the next. Movement becomes more direct, but also more exposed. You are seen as easily as you see. On these plains, the rhythm changes again. The seasons become more visible, more immediate. The heat of summer lingers in the open air, while winter arrives with a sharper edge, carried across the land without interruption. The people who live here learn to read the sky as much as the ground, watching for subtle shifts in clouds, in wind, in the behavior of animals that move in response to these changes. And then there are the mountains, rising slowly from the earth, shaping the land in quieter but more powerful ways. They do not simply stand still. They influence everything around them. Rivers are guided by their slopes. Weather forms and shifts against their presence. Paths become narrower, more deliberate, as elevation changes the way the body moves and breathes. In these higher places, life takes on a different pace. There is a sense of distance, not just in space but in time. Travel becomes slower, more thoughtful. The land demands respect, not through force, but through its quiet persistence. It reminds you that not all movement is easy, and not all paths are meant to be taken quickly. Water moves through all of these spaces, connecting them in ways that are not always immediately visible. Rivers begin as small streams, often hidden among rocks or beneath dense growth, and slowly gather strength as they travel. They carve their way through the land, shaping valleys, feeding forests, sustaining life along their edges. To follow a river is to follow a thread that ties different worlds together. Near these waters, life gathers more closely. The soil is often richer. The plants grow thicker. Animals come to drink, to move, to rest. People learn these patterns, returning to the same places over time, understanding that water does not just support life. It organizes it. It creates points of connection where movement slows and interaction becomes more likely. Along the coast, the land meets something even larger. The steady rhythm of waves, the vast openness of the ocean, introduces another layer of awareness. The horizon stretches further than it does inland, and the sound of water becomes constant, shaping the way silence is understood. Here, the land feels less enclosed, more connected to something beyond itself. Each of these environments carries its own lessons, its own ways of guiding those who live within it, but none of them exist in isolation. They blend gradually, often without clear boundaries. A forest thins into grassland. A river bends from mountains into plains. The transitions are soft, almost unnoticed, yet they influence everything. From the types of plants that grow, to the animals that move through, to the patterns of human life that emerge. What becomes clear, over time, is that the land is not passive. It does not simply sit beneath those who walk across it. It shapes decisions, it sets limits, it offers opportunities, but only within certain conditions. To live here is to listen, not in words, but in observation, in repetition, in the quiet understanding that comes from being present over long stretches of time. This relationship is not something that is explained all at once. It develops slowly, often beginning in childhood, through small experiences that build upon each other. A path learned by following someone older, a place remembered because of how it feels at a certain time of day, a change in the air that signals something shifting even before it becomes visible. These are not lessons written down, they are absorbed. And because the land varies so widely, so do these experiences. What is known in one place may not apply in another. The knowledge of the forest does not fully prepare you for the openness of the plains. The rhythms of the mountains differ from those of the rivers. Each environment asks for its own kind of attention, its own kind of patience. Over time, this creates a deep familiarity, not just with the land as a whole, but with specific places within it. A bend in a river, a clearing among trees, a ridge that offers a certain view. These places are not interchangeable. They carry their own significance, shaped by repeated presence and memory. They become part of how life is organized, even if that organization is not visible from a distance. There is no need to force structure onto the land. It already contains patterns, subtle, shifting, but consistent enough to be understood. The movement of animals follows these patterns. The growth of plants responds to them. And human life, when it is attentive, begins to align with them as well. Not perfectly, not without effort, but with a quiet intention that develops over time. And so, as you continue to move through this world, the land remains the constant, not as a background, but as an active presence. It is always shaping, always guiding, always offering something, while also holding back what cannot be taken without consequence. It does not rush, it does not demand attention, but it rewards those who notice. In this way, the land becomes more than a setting. It becomes a partner in the unfolding of life, not through spoken agreement, but through a shared rhythm that, once understood, feels steady and reliable. It is not something to be mastered. It is something to be known, slowly, carefully, and with respect for the quiet complexity it holds. And as this understanding deepens, everything else begins to make more sense. The way people move, the way they build, the way they eat, rest, and connect. All of it begins here, with the land itself, quietly shaping the possibilities of life. Morning does not arrive all at once. It begins gently, with a slow shift in light that moves across the land without urgency. The air feels different before the sun fully rises, carrying a quiet coolness that lingers for a while. In this early moment, the world is already awake, but not yet busy. Movement is soft, sounds are few, and life begins not with a sudden start, but with a gradual awareness. People rise in a similar way. There is no need for abrupt transitions, no sharp division between rest and activity. Instead, waking feels like a continuation of what was already there. The body adjusting, the senses opening, the mind returning to the rhythm of the day. There is a quiet understanding of what needs to be done, but it is not rushed. The day unfolds in its own time. Living here means paying attention to these small beginnings, the direction of the wind, the quality of the light, the subtle signals that indicate what kind of day it might become. These are not separate from daily life. They are part of it. Decisions are shaped not by rigid plans, but by observation, by noticing what the land is offering and what it is withholding. Movement through the day follows these patterns. In some moments, there is activity, gathering, preparing, walking to a nearby place that has been visited many times before. In other moments, there is stillness, a pause that is not empty, but full of quiet awareness. Time does not feel divided into strict segments. It flows, shifting naturally between action and rest. Seasons play a deeper role in shaping life. They are not just changes in weather, but changes in possibility. What can be found? What can be done? What must be prepared for? All of it shifts as the year moves forward. Spring carries a sense of return, as plants begin to grow again and animals become more visible. There is movement, but it is patient, unfolding step by step. Summer extends these patterns. The days grow longer, and the land feels more open, more active. Food becomes easier to find in many places, and there is a sense of abundance. Though it is understood quietly, without excess, people move more freely, often covering greater distances, following the opportunities that the season provides. Then, slowly, the air begins to change again. Autumn does not arrive suddenly. It approaches in small signs. A shift in color, a difference in temperature, a change in the behavior of animals. This is a time of preparation, but not in a hurried way. It is a careful gathering of what will be needed, guided by experience rather than urgency. Winter brings a different kind of stillness. The land rests, and life adjusts to a slower pace. Movement becomes more deliberate. Energy is used more carefully. But even here, there is no sense of absence. Life continues quietly, within the boundaries that the season sets. The rhythm remains, only softer, more contained. Throughout all of this, there is a deep connection between daily actions and the larger patterns of the world. Nothing feels separate. Gathering food is not just a task, but part of a cycle that has been repeated many times. Walking a familiar path is not just movement, but a continuation of a relationship with the land. Even rest is not empty. It is part of maintaining balance. Children grow into this understanding slowly. They watch, they listen, they follow. Learning does not happen through formal instruction alone, but through presence. A child might walk alongside an elder, noticing how they move, where they pause, what they pay attention to. Over time, these observations settle into memory, forming a quiet foundation of knowledge. There is no need to rush this process. Knowledge builds through repetition, through seeing the same patterns again and again, in slightly different forms. A plant that grows in one place during one season may appear differently in another. An animal's behavior shifts with the weather, with the time of year, with subtle changes that are not always obvious at first. Understanding comes from staying with these patterns long enough to recognize them. This way of living does not separate the physical from the mental. Thinking is not detached from doing. It is part of it. Each action carries a kind of awareness, shaped by past experience and present observation. There is no need to over-explain. The knowledge is already there, carried quietly within each movement. Even the idea of work feels different. It is not something that exists apart from life. It is life, gathering, building, preparing. These are not tasks to be completed as quickly as possible. They are part of the rhythm, part of the way each day unfolds. There is effort, certainly, but it is not framed by pressure. It is guided by necessity and balance. Relationships also follow this quieter pattern. People spend time together not only through conversation, but through shared presence, sitting near a fire, walking along a path, working side by side. These moments do not need to be filled with constant words. The connection exists in the shared experience, in the understanding that grows naturally over time. There is also space for solitude, for being alone without feeling separate. A person might walk a short distance away, sit near a river, or stand at the edge of a clearing. These moments are not empty. They are part of maintaining balance, a way to reconnect with the broader rhythm of the land without distraction. As the day begins to slow, the light shifts again. The energy of movement fades, replaced by a quieter presence. Tasks are completed gradually, not rushed to an abrupt end. The air cools, the sounds change. Evening settles in not as a stopping point, but as another transition, another phase of the same continuous flow. Night brings its own rhythm. The fire becomes a central point, offering warmth and light without overwhelming the darkness around it. People gather, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply sitting together. The sky above becomes more visible, filled with patterns that are known not as distant objects, but as part of a larger system that connects everything. Sleep follows naturally. There is no need to force it. The body, having moved with the day, begins to rest with it. The mind slows, not because it is told to, but because it has followed the rhythm that allows it to settle. And as rest takes hold, the cycle prepares to begin again, not as repetition, but as continuation. Living with nature is not about constant awareness or effort. It is about alignment, about finding a way to move within the patterns that already exist, rather than against them. It is a relationship built slowly over time through attention and presence. And once it is understood, even in part, it creates a sense of steadiness, a quiet confidence that life can continue, as it has, without needing to be forced into something else. There is no single way a home appears here, no uniform shape that stretches across the land. Instead, each place reflects its surroundings, shaped by what is available, by what is needed, and by what has been learned over time. A home is not built to stand apart from the land, but to sit within it, quietly, as though it has always belonged there. In the forested regions where trees are abundant and the ground is often soft with fallen leaves, homes rise from materials gathered nearby. Wood bends and forms the structure. Bark, carefully removed and shaped, becomes a covering that protects from wind and rain. These homes are not large, but they are steady. They hold warmth in colder seasons and allow air to move gently through them when the weather softens. From a distance, they are not immediately visible. They blend into the surroundings, their colors matching the tones of the forest. Smoke might rise softly above them, a quiet signal that life is present. But even that fades quickly into the air. Nothing demands attention. Everything settles into place with a kind of calm intention. On the open plains, where trees are fewer and the wind moves more freely, homes take on a different form. Here, structures must respond to movement, not just of people, but of weather and animals. Materials are lighter, designed to be carried, assembled, and taken down again as needed. These homes do not resist the wind entirely. They shift with it, holding their shape through flexibility rather than weight. There is a quiet understanding in this design. The land here is wide, and life often follows patterns that require movement. To remain in one place without adjustment would not align with the rhythm of the environment. So homes are created not as permanent anchors, but as companions to a way of life that flows across space. In areas near rivers and fertile land, where the soil supports consistent growth, settlements may feel more grounded. Homes are arranged with a sense of continuity, returning to the same places over many seasons. The materials vary, sometimes including earth, wood, and plant fibers combined in ways that create structures more fixed in their presence. Even so, they do not dominate the land. They sit within it, part of a larger pattern that includes fields, water, and open space. These settlements are not crowded. There is space between homes, space for movement, for gathering, for quiet separation when needed. The arrangement is not forced into rigid lines. It follows the natural shape of the land, adjusting to the slope of the ground, the direction of the wind, the path of nearby water. Each placement carries intention, even if it is not immediately obvious. Inside these homes, life is simple but complete. The space is used carefully. Tools are placed where they are needed. Areas for rest are defined without strict boundaries. Fire often sits at the center, providing warmth and a place for food to be prepared. The light it creates shifts gently across the interior, marking time in a way that feels natural and unhurried. There is no excess here, no accumulation of objects beyond what is useful or meaningful. Each item has a purpose, shaped by the hands that made it or the needs it fulfills. This does not create emptiness. It creates clarity, a sense that everything within the space belongs and nothing is out of place. Homes are not isolated from one another. They exist within a wide network of relationships. People move between them easily, without formality. A path between two dwellings may be barely visible, worn gently by repeated steps rather than defined by construction. These connections are not marked with boundaries, but understood through familiarity and trust. Children move freely within these spaces. They learn the layout of their surroundings not through instruction, but through exploration. A doorway, a corner, a place where light falls differently at certain times of day. These become points of recognition, quietly shaping their understanding of home. Over time, these impressions settle into memory, forming a sense of belonging that is not tied to a single structure, but to the environment as a whole. Seasonal changes can shift the nature of these homes. In some places, structures are reinforced or adjusted to respond to colder weather. Openings are covered more carefully. Materials are layered to hold warmth. In other seasons, the same spaces may feel more open, allowing air to move through more freely. The home adapts, just as life around it does. There is also an understanding that a home does not always remain in one place. In regions where movement is part of life, the idea of a home extends beyond the physical structure. It includes the people, the shared routines, the knowledge carried from one place to another. When a group moves, the home moves with them, not as a fixed object, but as a pattern that can be recreated. Even in more settled areas, there is no sense that a structure must last forever. Materials return to the land over time. Wood weathers, earth shifts. When a home is no longer needed, it does not leave a lasting scar. It fades slowly, becoming part of the environment again. This cycle is not seen as loss, but as continuation. Gathering spaces often form naturally within these settlements. A place where people come together, sometimes marked by a larger fire, or simply by the way the ground has been used repeatedly. These spaces are not defined by walls, but by presence. They hold memory of conversations, of shared moments, of quiet connection that doesn't need to be recorded. There is a sense of ease in how these homes exist. They are not built to impress or to stand apart as symbols. They are built to function, to support life in a way that feels aligned with the land. Their beauty, if it can be called that, comes from this alignment, from the way they sit within their surroundings without disrupting them. As evening returns and the light begins to fade, these homes take on a softer presence. The outlines blur slightly in the dimness. Firelight glows from within, casting gentle patterns that shift with each movement. From the outside, the settlement feels calm, almost still. Yet within each structure, life continues quietly. And so, across this vast land, homes appear and disappear in different forms, each shaped by its environment, each reflecting a way of living that does not separate itself from the world around it. There is no single design that defines them, no one structure that represents all. Instead, there is a quiet diversity, a collection of ways to create shelter, comfort, and belonging without disturbing the balance that holds everything together. Food does not begin as a task. It begins as a relationship, something understood over time, shaped by attention rather than urgency. The land offers what it can, but never all at once, and never without quiet conditions. To live here is to learn these conditions slowly, to notice where nourishment exists, and when it can be taken without disturbing the rhythm that allows it to return again. In the early part of the day, movement often follows familiar paths, not rushed, not forced. A person might walk toward a place where certain plants grow, guided by memory and subtle changes in the season. The ground itself offers signs, a shift in color, a different texture underfoot, the presence of other life that gathers near the same source. These are quiet signals, easily missed without practice, but clear to those who have spent time observing. Gathering plants is not random. It is careful, selective. Leaves, roots, berries, seeds. Each has its time. Taking too early would leave them incomplete. Taking too late might mean they have already changed, become less useful, or returned to the cycle of the land. There is an understanding here that timing matters, not as a strict rule, but as a form of respect for how things grow. Hands move gently. What is needed is taken, but not everything. There is always something left behind, not as a conscious sacrifice, but as part of maintaining what already works. The land is not emptied, it is allowed to continue. And so, the act of gathering becomes something steady and quiet, repeated over time without exhaustion. In other moments, attention shifts toward animals. Hunting is not constant. It is not driven by impulse. It is approached with patience, with observation, with an awareness that the animal is also part of the same environment, moving according to its own patterns. To hunt is not to interrupt these patterns, but to understand them deeply enough to move within them. A hunter does not rush across the land without direction. Movement is measured, quiet. The body adjusts to the pace of the surroundings. The wind is considered. The ground is read carefully, each mark carrying information. A track pressed into soft soil, a broken stem, a subtle shift in how the landscape feels. These details guide the process, not force. When an animal is taken, the moment is not loud. It does not carry celebration in the way one might expect. Instead, there is a pause, a recognition of what has occurred. The animal is not seen as separate from the larger system, and so its presence, even in this moment, remains part of that balance. Nothing is wasted. Each part is used with care, extending the life that was given into many forms. Preparation of food is also unhurried. Fire is often central, not just as a source of heat, but as a place where transformation happens slowly. Meat is cooked carefully, watched, turned, allowed to change at its own pace. Plants are prepared in ways that bring out their usefulness, sometimes eaten fresh, sometimes dried or stored for later. The process is not rushed to completion. It unfolds, just as everything else does. In places where the land allows it, agriculture becomes part of this rhythm as well. Small areas are tended, not in vast uniform fields, but in ways that respond to the surrounding environment. Crops grow together, supporting each other quietly. The soil is not forced beyond its capacity. It is worked gently, often returning to rest after a period of use. Seeds are saved and carried forward, linking one season to the next. There is an awareness of continuity here, that what is planted today is connected to what will come later. This understanding does not create pressure. It creates steadiness, a sense that the future is shaped through small, repeated actions that align with what has already been learned. Water plays its role in all of this. Rivers and streams provide not only drinking water, but also places where certain foods can be found more easily. Fish move through these waters, following their own patterns, sometimes predictable, sometimes less so. To gather from water is to watch it closely, to notice where life gathers, where it shifts, where it becomes still. Fishing, like hunting, is not done without thought. It requires patience, timing, and an understanding of movement beneath the surface. Tools are simple but effective, shaped over time through experience. And again, there is no sense of taking more than is needed. The balance remains, quietly guiding each action. Meals themselves are not separate events that interrupt the day. They are part of its flow. People gather, sometimes in small groups, sometimes with more. Food is shared, passed between hands, consumed without hurry. There is conversation, but it is not constant. There is also silence, a comfortable presence that does not need to be filled. Children learn through this process without formal instruction. They watch how food is gathered, how it is prepared, how it is shared. They begin with small tasks, carrying, observing, trying. Over time, their understanding grows, not through explanation alone, but through participation. The knowledge becomes part of them, just as it has become part of those before them. Scarcity is understood, but not feared in a constant way. There are times when food is less available, when the land offers less than it does in other seasons. But this is part of the rhythm, not a disruption. Preparation, patience, and memory guide people through these periods, allowing life to continue without panic. There is no attempt to control the land beyond what is necessary. No effort to extract everything it can give. Instead, there is a quiet agreement, not spoken, but lived. The land provides, and in return, it is not exhausted. This balance is not perfect, but it is maintained through attention, through restraint, through the understanding that survival depends on continuity. Even the act of eating carries this awareness. Food is not consumed without thought. It is recognized, even if only briefly, as something that has come from the land, from the larger system that supports all life. This recognition does not interrupt the moment. It exists within it, adding a quiet layer of meaning that does not need to be expressed loudly. And so, food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes part of a larger pattern, a continuous exchange between people and the environment they live within. Each action, each choice, contributes to the stability of that pattern, allowing it to continue across time without losing its balance. In this way, survival is not a constant struggle. It is a steady process, shaped by knowledge, guided by observation, and sustained through a relationship with the land that remains calm, attentive, and quietly enduring. Nothing here is made in haste. Each object begins long before it takes its final shape, starting as a quiet observation of what the land offers. A straight branch noticed while walking, a stone with a certain weight and texture, fibers that can be pulled gently from plants. These materials are not gathered randomly. They are recognized, slowly, through familiarity. To create a tool is not to force something new into existence. It is to reveal what is already possible within the material. A piece of wood does not become something else entirely. It is shaped, guided, encouraged into a form that serves a purpose while still remaining what it is. This approach carries a certain calmness. Nothing is rushed, nothing is wasted. Hands move with memory. Motions are repeated, refined over many years, often learned by watching someone else long before attempting them alone. A child might sit nearby, quietly observing how a tool is formed, how pressure is applied, how angles are adjusted, how patience is held through the process. There are no loud instructions. The learning happens through presence. Stone tools, shaped carefully through repeated strikes, carry a quiet precision. Each movement must be controlled, but not rigid. Too much force breaks what could have been useful. Too little changes nothing. There is a balance in each motion, guided by feel rather than measurement. Over time, this balance becomes natural, almost unspoken. Edges form slowly. Surfaces smooth out with attention. What begins as a rough piece becomes something that fits the hand, something that responds when used. These tools are not decorative. They are made to work, to assist in daily life without drawing attention to themselves. Their effectiveness is quiet, steady. Wood is treated differently. It bends, it shifts. It responds to moisture and heat. Those who work with it understand these changes, adjusting their approach accordingly. A piece might be soaked, shaped, dried, and reshaped again. Time is part of the process. There is no need to complete everything in a single moment. Fibers gathered from plants are twisted, woven, and layered into forms that hold together with surprising strength. Baskets take shape slowly, each strand placed with care. There is a rhythm to the weaving, a repetition that feels almost like breathing, steady, continuous, unhurried. The result is not just a container, but an extension of the hands that made it. Clothing follows a similar pattern. Materials are gathered from animals or plants, prepared carefully, and shaped into garments that respond to the environment. These are not created for display, but for comfort, for protection, for movement. Each piece reflects an understanding of the conditions it will meet: the cold, the wind, the heat. There is also a quiet beauty in these creations, though it is not always intended in the way we might think. Patterns may appear, designs may form, but they emerge naturally from the process, from the repetition of movement and the familiarity of materials. Nothing is added simply for decoration. Everything belongs. Tools are not discarded easily. They are cared for, repaired, adjusted when needed. A handle may be replaced. An edge may be sharpened again and again. The life of an object extends beyond its first use, carried forward through attention and maintenance. This creates a continuity, a sense that objects are part of a longer story. Different environments shape different tools. In forested areas, tools may focus on cutting, shaping, working with wood. On the plains, where movement is more constant, tools may be lighter, easier to carry. Near water, designs adjust again, responding to what is needed for fishing or travel. There is no single form that fits all places. This diversity does not create confusion. It creates adaptation. Each group, each region, develops what works for them, guided by experience rather than imitation. Knowledge is shared, but it is also shaped by local conditions. What is useful in one place may not be in another. This understanding keeps craftsmanship flexible, responsive. The act of making is often quiet. It does not require large gatherings or constant attention. A person might sit near the edge of a settlement, working slowly, repeating movements that have become familiar. Others may pass by, sometimes watching, sometimes joining for a while. The process does not demand isolation, but it allows for it. There is a sense of calm focus in these moments. The mind settles into the rhythm of the work. Time moves gently, marked not by clocks, but by the progress of the object taking shape. There is satisfaction, but it is not loud. It rests quietly within the process itself, not just in the finished result. Tools are extensions of the body. They fit the hand, respond to movement, become part of how a person interacts with the world. This connection is built over time. A tool used often becomes familiar, almost predictable, allowing actions to flow more smoothly. There is trust in this relationship, developed through repeated use. When tools are passed from one person to another, they carry more than function. They carry memory of how they were made, how they were used, how they were cared for. This passing does not require formal ceremony. It happens naturally, as part of life continuing forward. The object remains the same, but its meaning deepens. Even in their simplicity, these tools reflect a deep understanding of the environment. They are not overbuilt. They do not attempt to solve more than what is needed. Each one exists for a clear purpose, shaped by knowledge that has been tested over time. This clarity keeps everything balanced, preventing excess. There is no separation between craftsmanship and daily life. Making, repairing, using. These are all part of the same flow. A tool created in one moment becomes part of another. The boundary between creation and use fades, leaving only a continuous pattern of interaction with the world. And so, across this land, objects take shape quietly, guided by hands that have learned to listen to materials, to respond to them rather than control them. There is no need for complexity beyond what is useful, no need for speed beyond what is steady. The result is a collection of tools that support life without overwhelming it. Simple, effective, and deeply connected to the environment from which they come. Life here is not organized through rigid systems that stand above everyone. It does not rely on fixed hierarchies that separate people into clear levels. Instead, it moves through relationships, quiet connections that form over time, shaped by trust, experience, and shared presence. There is structure, but it is not imposed loudly. It exists within the flow of daily life, often felt more than seen. Families form the center of this structure. Not only the closest relatives, but extended connections that stretch outward, linking individuals across generations. A child grows not within a single pair of voices, but among many. Different people guide, teach, and support, each offering something unique. This creates a sense of belonging that is wide, not confined to one small space. Roles exist, but they are not always fixed. They shift gently, responding to need and ability. Someone who is skilled in a certain task may take the lead in that moment, while in another situation, a different person steps forward. Authority is not constant. It moves, quietly adjusting to what is required. This fluidity allows the group to remain balanced without forcing strict control. Elders hold a particular kind of presence, not through power, but through experience. They have lived through many cycles of seasons, observed changes, and gathered knowledge that cannot be learned quickly. Their voices carry weight, but not in a commanding way. People listen because they recognize the depth of what has been seen and remembered. Decisions are often made through discussion rather than instruction. There is time given for voices to be heard, for ideas to settle before action is taken. This process is not rushed. It reflects an understanding that choices affect not just the present moment, but the continuity of life moving forward. Patience becomes part of how decisions are formed. In daily life, cooperation feels natural. Tasks are shared, not divided in a rigid sense, but balanced across the group. One person gathers, another prepares, another repairs, another watches over the young. These actions are not assigned through strict rules. They emerge from familiarity, from knowing what needs to be done and stepping into that space. There is also space for individuality. People are not identical in how they move through life. Each person carries their own abilities, their own tendencies, their own quiet way of contributing. This difference is not something to be corrected. It is part of the strength of the group, allowing various needs to be met without forcing everyone into the same shape. Children observe this balance as they grow. They see how people interact, how decisions are made, how roles shift. Learning does not come through formal instruction alone. It comes through witnessing, through being present in moments where cooperation happens naturally. Over time, they begin to understand where they fit, not as a fixed position, but as a place that can change. Conflict, when it arises, is not ignored, but it is also not amplified. There is an effort to return to balance rather than to escalate tension. Conversations may take place quietly, away from the center of activity. Time is often allowed for emotions to settle before resolution is sought. The goal is not to win, but to restore harmony within the group. There are leaders, but leadership is not always permanent. It can shift depending on the situation. In times that require certain knowledge or skill, someone steps forward naturally. When that moment passes, the same person may return to a quieter role. This prevents power from becoming rigid, allowing the structure to remain flexible. Gatherings play an important role in maintaining connection. These are not always formal events. Sometimes they are simple moments where people come together, share food, exchange stories, or sit in quiet presence. These gatherings reinforce the sense that no one exists entirely alone. Each person is part of something wider, something that continues beyond any single individual. Communication itself is often measured. Words are used, but not excessively. Silence is not uncomfortable. It holds meaning, allowing thoughts to settle and be understood without constant explanation. This creates a different kind of listening, one that pays attention not just to what is said, but to what is felt. Responsibility is shared, but it is also personal. Each person understands that their actions affect others. This awareness does not create pressure, but it encourages care. Decisions are made with consideration, not only for immediate outcomes, but for how they ripple outward through relationships. There is no strict separation between social life and daily tasks. Interaction happens within the flow of activity. Working together, walking together, resting near one another. These are all moments where connection is reinforced. The structure of society is not built in separate spaces. It is woven into everything that happens. In larger groups, connections extend beyond immediate families. Clans or broader networks form, linking people through shared ancestry or long-standing relationships. These connections create a wider sense of identity, one that reaches beyond a single settlement or moment in time. Yet even here, the tone remains calm. Identity is carried quietly, without the need for constant declaration. Movement between groups is also possible. People may visit, stay for a time, or form new connections across different regions. These interactions are guided by familiarity and trust, built gradually rather than assumed. Over time, networks expand, not through force, but through repeated contact and shared experience. What becomes clear is that structure exists, but it does not need to be rigid to be effective. It adapts, responds, and holds together through a combination of memory, trust, and quiet understanding. There is no single system that defines it. Instead, there is a pattern that repeats in different forms, shaped by the people and the land they live within. And within this pattern, life continues steadily, each person moving in their own way, yet always connected to others, each action contributing, even in small ways, to the balance that allows the whole to remain intact. It is not a structure that demands attention. It is one that supports life quietly, allowing it to unfold without interruption. There is no clear line here between the physical and the unseen. The world does not divide itself into separate layers of reality. Instead, everything feels connected. The land, the sky, the animals, the movement of water, and the quiet presence of people within it. Meaning is not placed outside of life. It moves through it gently, often without being spoken directly. Belief is not something that begins with explanation. It begins with experience. A child walking through the forest may feel a certain stillness in one place, a sense that the space holds more than what is immediately visible. No one needs to define this feeling in precise terms. It is enough to notice it, to return to it, to carry it quietly over time. The natural world is not seen as empty or passive. It carries presence. Rivers are not only flowing water. They have a kind of awareness, a continuity that stretches beyond a single moment. Mountains do not simply stand. They hold memory, shape weather, and influence the movement of everything around them. Even the wind, moving unseen, feels like part of a larger conversation that never fully stopped. Animals are not separate from this understanding. They are not viewed only as resources, but as beings that exist within the same system, following their own paths, their own rhythms. Observing an animal is not just about learning how it moves or where it goes. It is also about recognizing its place within a larger balance, one that includes people but does not center them. This connection creates a sense of respect that does not need to be enforced. It grows naturally from awareness. When something is taken from the land, whether plant or animal, there is often a quiet acknowledgement, not always spoken aloud, not always formal, but present. A moment of recognition that what is used comes from something that continues beyond that single act. Stories carry much of this understanding. They are not always meant to explain everything directly. Instead, they hold layers of meaning that unfold over time. A story told beside a fire may seem simple at first. A description of an animal, a journey, a moment in the past. But within it, there are patterns, connections, reminders of how the world works. These stories are repeated, but never exactly the same. Each telling adjusts slightly, shaped by the person sharing it, by the moment, by the listeners present. This keeps them alive, flexible, able to respond to changing circumstances while still carrying the core understanding forward. The meaning is not fixed. It grows quietly. There are also moments of stillness that carry spiritual weight. A person might sit alone near water or stand at the edge of a wide open space, feeling the presence of the world around them. These moments do not require formal structure. They are part of life itself. Times when attention deepens, when awareness shifts from action to observation. Ceremonies exist, but they do not always separate themselves sharply from daily life. They emerge naturally, often tied to seasons, to changes in the land, to events that hold significance for the community. These gatherings bring people together, creating a shared sense of connection that extends beyond individual experience. During these times, there may be songs, movements, objects that carry meaning. But even then, the tone remains calm. The purpose is not to create intensity or spectacle. It is to align, to remember, to reconnect with patterns that have been understood over many generations. The ceremony becomes a quiet reflection of the larger world. Time is not seen as a straight line moving forward without return. It feels more circular, more layered. Past and present are not entirely separate. They exist together, influencing each other. Ancestors are not distant figures that fade away. Their presence continues, carried through memory, through story, through the actions that are repeated again and again. This creates a sense that life is part of something ongoing, something that extends beyond a single lifetime. Actions are not only for the present moment. They are part of a continuity that moves forward, shaped by what has come before. This understanding does not create pressure. It creates steadiness, a feeling that each moment is connected to something larger. There is no single belief system that defines all people across the land. Just as environments differ, so do these understandings. Each group, each region, carries its own ways of expressing connection, its own stories, its own forms of ceremony. But beneath these differences, there is often a shared sense of relationship between people and the world they live within. The unseen is not treated as something distant or unreachable. It is woven into everyday experience. A change in weather, a dream, an unexpected moment in nature. All can carry meaning, not as something to be analyzed heavily, but as something to be noticed and remembered. Interpretation happens slowly, often over time, rather than in immediate conclusions. Learning this aspect of life takes patience. It cannot be rushed or fully explained at once. It develops through exposure, through participation, through quiet observation. A child hears stories, attends gatherings, watches how others respond to certain moments. Gradually, understanding forms, not as a set of fixed ideas, but as a way of seeing. There is also an acceptance that not everything needs to be understood completely. Some aspects of the world remain beyond clear explanation, and this is not seen as a problem. It is part of the balance. The unknown does not create discomfort. It exists alongside the known, forming a wider sense of reality that does not require constant clarity. In this way, belief is not separate from life. It does not stand apart as a system to be followed. It moves through actions, through relationships, through the quiet awareness that connects everything. It shapes how people see the land, how they interact with it, how they understand their place within it, without needing to be defined in rigid terms. And so, as the day moves forward, as the seasons shift, as life continues in its steady rhythm, this spiritual presence remains, not always visible, not always spoken, but always there, woven into the fabric of existence in a way that feels natural, continuous, and quietly complete. Movement is not separate from life here. It is part of its rhythm, as natural as the changing light, as steady as the turning of seasons. People do not remain fixed in one place without reason. They follow patterns shaped by the land, by water, by animals, and by the quiet understanding of where they need to be at different times of the year. Paths exist, but they are not always marked in obvious ways. A trail may begin as a series of repeated steps, worn gently into the ground over many seasons. It may follow the edge of a river, wind through a forest, or stretch across open plains where the horizon feels distant and wide. These paths are known not through signs, but through memory, carried by those who have walked them before. Travel is often unhurried. There is no need to rush from one place to another without purpose. The journey itself becomes part of the experience, a time to observe the land, to notice changes, to reconnect with familiar places. Movement is not only about reaching a destination. It is about staying within the flow of the environment as it shifts. Rivers play a central role in this movement. They offer direction, connection, and a sense of continuity that stretches across great distances. Following a river feels different from walking through forest or plain. The water provides a steady guide, its course linking one region to another in a way that is both practical and quietly reassuring. Travel by water carries its own rhythm. The surface moves beneath you, responding to wind, current, and the shape of the land. There is a need for awareness, for adjusting to subtle changes, but there is also a sense of ease in being carried forward. The journey becomes a balance between control and surrender, guiding without forcing. As people move, they encounter others, not constantly, but often enough to create a network of connection across the land. These meetings are not always planned. They happen at certain points, near water, along familiar routes, in places where movement naturally slows. Over time, these encounters become expected, part of the larger pattern of life. Trade emerges from these moments, not as a system driven by urgency or accumulation, but as a quiet exchange of what is available. One group may carry materials that are not found elsewhere, stones from distant places, shells from the coast, plants that grow only in certain conditions. Another group offers something different. The exchange happens naturally, guided by mutual understanding. There is no fixed measure that defines value in the same way across all places. What matters is usefulness, rarity, and the relationship between those exchanging. A tool, a piece of clothing, a bundle of food. Each carries meaning beyond its immediate function. It represents time, effort, and the knowledge that shaped it. Trade is not only about objects, it is also about information. Stories move along these paths, carried from one place to another. Knowledge of distant lands, changes in seasons, observations about animals or weather. All of this travels quietly, linking communities that may never see each other directly. The land becomes connected through these shared understandings. The act of exchanging does not feel transactional in a rigid sense. It is not about exact balance in a single moment. It is about maintaining relationships over time. A gift given now may be returned later, or not at all in a direct way. The connection itself holds value, extending beyond any single exchange. Movement also allows for adaptation. When conditions change in one area, people may travel to another that offers different possibilities. This flexibility prevents life from becoming fixed in a way that cannot respond to shifts in the environment. It creates resilience, a quiet ability to adjust without disruption. Travel requires preparation, but it is not heavy or complicated. People carry what is needed, but not more than that. The land provides along the way, offering food, water, and materials as needed. This reduces the burden of movement, allowing journeys to remain steady rather than exhausting. There is also an understanding of distance that does not rely on numbers. Distance is felt through time, through effort, through familiarity. A place may be known as a day's walk, or beyond the bend of the river, or past the place where the land rises. These descriptions are not imprecise. They are grounded in experience, in the way the body and the land interact. As people travel, they carry with them their ways of living, their knowledge, their quiet habits. These do not remain unchanged. They shift slightly through contact with others, through exposure to different environments. Over long periods, this movement creates a subtle blending, not erasing differences, but allowing ideas and practices to flow gently across regions. Returning from a journey also holds meaning. Familiar places appear again, recognized through small details. A certain tree, a curve in the river, the way light falls across a clearing. There is a sense of continuity in this return, a reminder that movement does not break connection, it extends it. Within settlements, the presence of movement is always felt. People come and go. Visitors arrive, stay for a time, then continue onward. News travels quietly, carried by those who have seen other places. This creates a sense that no community exists in complete isolation. Each is part of a larger, shifting network that spans the land. Even within shorter distances, movement shapes daily life. Walking to gather food, to visit another household, to reach a nearby water source. These small journeys repeat again and again, forming patterns that become as familiar as the structures people live in. The body learns these paths, moving without effort, guided by memory. And so, across this wide landscape, movement continues, not as disruption, but as connection. Paths form and fade, rivers guide and change, people travel and return. Trade flows quietly within this motion, carrying objects, knowledge, and relationships from one place to another. It is not a system that needs to be controlled. It sustains itself through repetition, through familiarity, through the steady presence of those who walk the land and know its ways. And in this continuous movement, life remains flexible, connected, and quietly balanced. There is no single way of living across this land, no one pattern that repeats everywhere without change. Instead, life unfolds in many forms, each shaped by the environment, by memory, by the quiet decisions made over generations. From a distance, it may seem like one continuous world, but as you move closer, differences begin to appear, not as divisions, but as variations within a larger harmony. In the forests of the East, life feels enclosed, held gently within layers of trees and shifting light. The people here move differently, speak with a rhythm shaped by their surroundings, and build in ways that respond to the density of the land. Their knowledge is tied closely to what grows beneath the canopy. Plants that thrive in shade, animals that move silently through the undergrowth, seasons that reveal themselves slowly. Further inland, near wide rivers and fertile valleys, patterns shift again. The land offers different possibilities, and people respond with different approaches. Settlements may remain longer in one place, shaped by the steady presence of water and soil that supports growth. The rhythm here includes planting, tending, and returning, cycles that align with the changing seasons in a more grounded way. On the open plains, where the horizon stretches far and the wind moves without interruption, life expands outward. Movement becomes more central. People follow patterns that extend across wide distances, adjusting to the behavior of animals and the changes in weather that sweep across the land. The sense of space influences everything: how people travel, how they build, how they understand distance itself. To the north, where the air grows colder and the seasons shift more sharply, life adapts once more. The land here requires careful attention to survival, but not in a frantic way. It is a steady awareness of how to work with conditions that can change quickly. Materials differ, tools adjust, and the rhythm of life becomes more contained during certain times of the year. Along the coasts, the presence of the ocean introduces another dimension. The land does not end at the water. It continues outward in a different form. People here learn to move between these spaces, understanding both the stability of the shore and the shifting nature of the sea. Their knowledge includes not only the land, but the patterns of tides, currents, and the life that moves beneath the surface. Each of these environments shapes culture in quiet but profound ways. Language, for example, develops differently in each place. Words emerge from experience, from what needs to be described, from what is important to remember. The sound of speech itself may reflect the landscape, softer in enclosed spaces, more open where the land stretches wide. Clothing also varies, not as a matter of style alone, but as a response to conditions. Materials are chosen based on what is available and what is needed. In colder regions, garments hold warmth carefully. In warmer areas, They allow air to move freely. Each piece reflects an understanding of the environment, shaped through repeated experience rather than abstract design. Food, too, differs across regions. What is gathered, hunted, or grown depends on the land and the season. The meals shared in one place may be unfamiliar in another, yet each carries the same quiet principle: taking what is available, preparing it with care, and maintaining the balance that allows it to return. Even within these broader regions, there are smaller variations. No two groups live in exactly the same way. Small differences in location, in history, in experience create subtle shifts in how life is organized. These differences are not barriers. They are part of the richness of the world. A reminder that there is no single path that must be followed. When people from different areas meet, there is both familiarity and difference. Some practices are recognized easily. Others require attention, observation, and patience to understand. This interaction does not erase individuality. It allows for exchange, a quiet sharing of knowledge that can be carried forward, adapted, or simply remembered. There is no need to unify these cultures into a single identity. They exist side by side, connected through movement, trade, and shared understanding of the land, yet distinct in their own ways. This balance allows diversity to remain without conflict, without the pressure to become the same. Stories reflect this variation as well. Each group carries its own narratives, shaped by the environment and the experiences of those who tell them. The themes may feel familiar: connection to the land, to animals, to the passage of time. But the details differ, offering new perspectives within a shared framework. Ceremonies, too, take different forms. The timing, the structure, the elements involved all adjust to local conditions and traditions. What remains consistent is the purpose: to reconnect, to remember, to align with the patterns that guide life. The expression changes, but the intention holds steady. This diversity is not chaotic. It is organized in a quieter way, through adaptation rather than control. Each group develops what works within its environment, refining it over time. There is no central authority dictating how life should be lived. Instead, there is a network of cultures, each complete in its own context, yet open to connection. Understanding this requires a shift in perspective. It asks you not to look for uniformity, not to expect repetition of the same forms across the land. Instead, it invites you to notice variation, to see how each way of living responds to specific conditions, and how these responses create a wide, interconnected world. And as you move slowly through this landscape from one region to another, these differences begin to feel natural. They do not interrupt the sense of continuity. They deepen it, showing how life can take many forms while still remaining balanced, still connected, still quietly complete. Nothing here is taken without thought, but the thought itself is quiet, almost unspoken. It does not arrive as a rule written down or enforced. It emerges slowly, through repetition, through memory, through the steady awareness that life continues only when the balance is allowed to remain. This understanding is not separate from daily actions. It lives within them. The land gives, but it doesn't give endlessly in the same way. Seasons shift, resources appear and fade. What is abundant in one moment may become scarce in another. Over time, people come to recognize these patterns, not as problems to solve, but as conditions to move within. This recognition shapes how much is taken and when. When gathering from the land, there is a natural limit, not because someone has set it, but because it is felt. Taking more than needed would not bring comfort. It would create imbalance. Not immediately, perhaps, but eventually. This awareness does not require constant attention. It becomes part of instinct, guiding decisions without needing to be explained. Hunting follows a similar rhythm. Animals move in cycles, their numbers rising and falling in response to the environment. To take too many would disrupt this pattern, making future survival uncertain. And so, there is restraint, not enforced through strict measures, but maintained through observation, through respect for how life renews itself. Agriculture, where it exists, reflects this balance as well. The soil is not pushed beyond its ability to recover. Land may be used for a time, then left to rest, allowing it to regain what has been taken. Crops are often grown together, supporting one another in quiet ways. Roots interacting beneath the surface, leaves shaping how sunlight reaches the ground. Fire, too, is used with care. It is not only a tool for warmth or cooking, but sometimes a way to shape the land gently. Small, controlled burns may clear undergrowth, allowing new plants to grow. This is not done recklessly. It requires understanding of wind, of moisture, of how fire moves and settles. Used carefully, it becomes part of maintaining balance, rather than disrupting it. Water is approached with the same awareness. Rivers, streams, lakes. These are not only sources of life, but systems that connect many forms of existence. Taking from them is done thoughtfully. Waste is not allowed to build. The flow is respected, its continuity understood as essential to everything around it. There is no sense of ownership that separates people from the land entirely. Instead, there is a relationship, one that carries responsibility without needing to be declared. The land is used, but it is also cared for, not through large interventions, but through small, consistent actions that prevent harm from growing. This approach does not mean that life is always easy or perfectly balanced. There are times when conditions become difficult, when food is less available, when weather shifts unexpectedly. But even in these moments, the response is not to take more than the land can give. It is to adjust, to move, to rely on knowledge that has been built over time. Movement itself becomes part of sustainability. By not remaining fixed in one place beyond what the land can support, people allow environments to recover. Paths shift, settlements change. Resources are given time to return. This mobility is not random. It follows patterns that have been observed and refined across generations. Storage also plays a role. Food gathered during times of abundance is preserved for later use, extending its availability without requiring constant extraction from the land. This creates a buffer, a quiet stability that supports life through less predictable periods. The act of storing is careful, measured, aligned with what can be maintained. Waste, in the sense we often imagine it, does not accumulate in the same way. Materials used in daily life return to the land over time. Objects are repaired, reused, and eventually break down naturally. There is no separation between what is used and what remains. Everything exists within a cycle that continues without interruption. Knowledge of this balance is carried forward through observation and experience. Elders remember times when the land offered more or less, when certain patterns changed. These memories are not kept as records alone. They are shared, woven into stories, into guidance that helps others understand how to move within shifting conditions. Children grow into this awareness gradually. They see how decisions are made, how restraint is practiced without being forced. They learn that survival is not about taking as much as possible, but about knowing when enough has been reached. This lesson is not taught in a single moment. It develops over time through repeated exposure. There is also a sense that humans are not separate from the systems they depend on. They are part of them. This perspective changes how actions are understood. Harm to the land is not distant. It returns eventually, affecting those who caused it. Care in the same way supports continuity, allowing life to move forward steadily. This balance does not require constant control. It sustains itself through attention, through familiarity, through the quiet recognition of patterns that have proven reliable over time. There is no need to dominate the environment to survive within it. There is only the need to understand it, to respond to it, and to remain within its limits. And so, across this wide landscape, life continues, not through excess, not through constant expansion, but through a steady alignment with what is available. Each action, each choice, contributes to a larger pattern that holds together without force, a balance that is not perfect, but enduring. Not everything here is visible in the way we expect. Much of what exists does not leave behind clear marks, no written records, no permanent structures that stand for centuries, no fixed lines that define exactly what was known and when. And yet, beneath the quiet surface of daily life, there is a depth that is not easily measured, a form of knowledge that moves through memory rather than through objects. This knowledge does not gather in one place. It spreads across people, across generations, carried in voices, in gestures, in repeated actions that seem simple but hold layers of understanding. A path walked many times is not just a route from one place to another. It contains information about the land, about timing, about what can be found along the way. Each step adds to what is already known. Language itself reflects this depth. Words are shaped by experience, by the need to describe what matters within a specific environment. Some meanings do not translate easily into other forms because they are tied so closely to place, to relationships, to patterns that cannot be separated from their context. To understand them fully requires time, not just explanation. Stories carry knowledge in a different way. They do not always present information directly. Instead, they hold it within images, within sequences that unfold slowly. A story may describe an event, but within it, there are lessons about behavior, about balance, about how to respond to certain conditions. These lessons are not forced. They are discovered gradually, often over repeated tellings. There are also forms of knowledge that exist in silence, ways of understanding that are not spoken aloud, but felt through presence. A person may sense a change in the environment before it becomes visible, a shift in the air, in the behavior of animals, in the subtle patterns that surround them. This awareness does not come from a single moment of learning. It develops through long attention. Memory plays a central role in preserving this depth. Without written records, information is held in the mind, reinforced through repetition. Important details are remembered not because they are recorded externally, but because they are used, shared, and revisited again and again. This creates a living form of knowledge, one that remains flexible, able to adapt as conditions change. Time, in this context, feels layered rather than distant. The past is not entirely separate from the present. It exists within it, carried through stories, through practices, through the way people move and respond. What was learned before continues to shape what is done now, creating a continuity that does not rely on physical markers. There is also an understanding that not all knowledge needs to be widely shared. Some information is held within certain groups, within certain roles, passed carefully from one person to another. This is not about exclusion. It is about preserving context, ensuring that knowledge remains connected to those who can carry it properly. Observation remains one of the most important ways this depth is maintained. Watching the land, the sky, the movement of animals. These are not passive activities. They are active forms of learning. Each observation adds to a larger picture, one that becomes clearer over time, but is never fully complete. This approach to knowledge does not create a fixed system. It allows for change. New experiences are added, old ones are adjusted. Understanding shifts as needed. There is no single moment where everything is known. Instead, there is a continuous process, a quiet expansion that does not seek to capture everything at once. Tools and objects also carry traces of this unseen depth. The way something is made, the method used, the material chosen, all reflect decisions based on knowledge that may not be immediately visible. A simple object can hold within it generations of refinement, even if that refinement is not explained. Even movement across the land contributes to this depth. Paths connect not only places, but information. Travel allows knowledge to spread, to blend, to adjust. What is learned in one region may influence another, not through direct instruction, but through contact, through shared experience that slowly integrates into existing patterns. Dreams, too, hold a place within this understanding. They are not dismissed as random or without meaning. They are part of the broader experience of life, sometimes offering insight, sometimes simply reflecting what has been seen. Their interpretation is not rigid. It unfolds gradually, often through reflection, rather than immediate conclusion. There is also a recognition that some aspects of the world remain beyond full understanding. This does not create discomfort. It is accepted as part of the larger balance. The unknown exists alongside the known, forming a wider sense of reality that does not need to be reduced or simplified. Learning then becomes a lifelong process. It does not end at a certain point. It continues as long as a person remains attentive to the world around them. Each season, each experience adds something new, even if it is small, even if it seems familiar. The depth grows quietly, without needing to be measured. What makes this knowledge difficult to see from the outside is not its absence, but its form. It does not gather in visible structures or written texts. It exists in movement, in memory, in the relationships between people and the land. It is present, but not always obvious. And so, as you move through this world, it becomes clear that much of what sustains it cannot be easily pointed to or recorded. It must be experienced, observed, and carried forward in the same way it was learned. Through time, through attention, through a quiet willingness to notice what does not announce itself. There is no single ending to this world. It does not arrive at a final moment where everything pauses or concludes. Instead, it continues, steady, quiet, unfolding in ways that do not need to be marked. And as you look back across all that has been gently revealed, what remains is not a single image, but a feeling, a sense of completeness that does not depend on what is seen at the surface. It is easy from a distance to search for what seems familiar, to look for structures that stand tall, for systems that appear clearly defined, for signs that match what we expect a complete world to look like. But here, completeness exists in a different form. It is found in balance, in the way each part connects to the others without needing to dominate them. The land, which at first seemed like a quiet background, reveals itself as something more central, not as something controlled, but as something understood. Forests, plains, rivers, mountains, each one shaping life without needing to announce its influence. And within these spaces, people move, not as separate figures, but as part of the same continuous pattern. There is no single story that defines this life, no central narrative that gathers everything into one direction. Instead, there are many paths, many ways of living, each complete within its own context. Some remain in one place longer, others move with the seasons. Some follow rivers, others walk open land. Each approach holds its own rhythm, its own quiet logic. The absence of rigid structures does not mean the absence of order. The order is simply less visible. It exists in relationships between people and the land, between the present and what has come before. These relationships hold everything together, not through force, but through continuity. Even the idea of progress feels different here. It is not measured by constant expansion or accumulation. It is measured by stability, by the ability of life to continue without breaking the patterns that support it. Change happens, but it does not rush forward without thought. It moves carefully, adjusting to what is already in place. The tools, the homes, the ways of gathering food, all of these reflect this understanding. They are not built to last forever in a fixed form. They are built to function, to adapt, to return to the land when their time has passed. Nothing insists on permanence beyond what is needed. And in this, there is a kind of quiet wisdom. Knowledge, too, remains present in a different way, not stored in visible records, but carried within people, within stories, within actions repeated across generations. It does not stand still. It moves, adjusts, deepens. What is known is never entirely separate from how it is lived. There is also a calm acceptance of what cannot be fully understood. Not everything is explained, not everything is made clear. Some parts of this world remain open, undefined, allowed to exist without being reduced. This does not weaken the system. It strengthens it, allowing space for flexibility, for interpretation, for quiet growth. As you sit with this reflection, the pace of everything feels slower. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything is happening in its own time. There is no need to rush toward conclusions, no need to define everything in sharp lines. The meaning exists within the experience itself, unfolding gently. You might notice how little of this world demands attention in a loud way. There are no overwhelming signals, no constant urgency, and yet nothing feels empty. Each moment carries presence, subtle, steady enough. It is a world that does not need to prove itself. It simply exists, fully, within its own balance. And perhaps that is what feels most distant now. Not the lack of visible structures, not the absence of written records, but the quiet confidence of a life that did not need to be explained constantly. A life that trusted its own patterns, its own rhythms, its own way of continuing forward. There is a tendency to look back and search for what was missing. But sitting here, within this slower understanding, that question begins to soften. What existed was not incomplete. It was not waiting to become something else. It was already whole, shaped by time, by land, by the countless lives that moved through it quietly. The paths may have faded. The structures may have returned to the earth. The voices may no longer be heard in the same way, but the patterns remain in subtle forms, in the way the land still holds memory, in the way certain rhythms continue even now, if you take the time to notice. And so, this world does not end. It settles. It becomes part of a deeper layer of understanding, one that does not disappear, but waits quietly beneath the surface, present for those who choose to move slowly enough to feel it again. There is nothing more to add, nothing more that needs to be explained, only this quiet awareness that a complete world once existed here, not loudly, not forcefully, but steadily. And in its own way it still does. And even as everything seems to settle, it does not disappear. It continues in the same quiet way it always has, moving gently beneath the surface of attention. The land remains where it is, unchanged in its deeper form. The forests still breathe in slow cycles. The plains still open wide beneath the sky. Rivers continue their steady movement, never rushing, never stopping, simply flowing as they always have. Morning still arrives without announcement. The light returns in the same gradual way, touching the edges of the world before fully revealing it. There is no need to mark this moment. It has happened before, many times, and it will happen again. The rhythm does not depend on being noticed. It carries on, whether observed or not. People wake within this rhythm, just as they did before. There is no clear beginning to the day, only a gentle shift from rest into awareness. Movement begins slowly. Someone steps outside. Someone else tends to a small task that has been repeated so often it no longer feels like a task at all. Just part of being present. The same paths are walked again, not exactly the same as before, but close enough that the body remembers without needing to think. Feet follow the shape of the land, adjusting slightly to what has changed. A branch fallen, the ground softened by recent rain. These differences are small. They do not interrupt the flow. They become part of it. The act of gathering continues. Hands reach for what is familiar, guided by memory that has been passed quietly from one person to another. There is no urgency in the motion, no sense that something must be taken quickly before it disappears. The land offers what it can, and what is needed is received. No more, no less. Children move within this space without questioning it. They follow, they watch, they begin to repeat small actions in their own way. There is no moment where learning begins. It has already begun. Simply by being here, by breathing the same air, by walking the same ground, by noticing without effort. Conversations happen, but they are soft. Words are shared when needed, then allowed to fade. Silence returns naturally, not as an absence, but as a presence of its own. It holds the space between actions, between thoughts, allowing everything to settle before moving again. The seasons continue their slow turning. There is no announcement of their arrival, only small signs. The way the air feels, the way the light changes, the behavior of animals that move according to patterns older than memory. These changes are noticed, but not interrupted. Life adjusts quietly, as it always has. Preparation happens without urgency. What needs to be done is done, but without tension. The body remembers what to do. The mind does not need to rush ahead. Each action leads naturally into the next, forming a sequence that feels steady, almost unbroken. Food is gathered again, prepared again, shared again. The process repeats, not as repetition that grows dull, but as continuity that feels reliable. There is comfort in this rhythm, a sense that life does not need to be redefined each day. It continues, supported by what has already been learned. Tools are used, set aside, used again. They do not call attention to themselves. They remain where they are needed, part of the environment rather than separate from it. Their presence is quiet, their purpose understood without explanation. Movement across the land continues in the same gentle way. Someone leaves for a short journey, following a path that has been walked many times before. Another returns, carrying something small, something that fits easily into the flow of daily life. These movements do not disrupt the rhythm. They extend it. The connections between people remain steady. There is no need to redefine them. They exist through shared presence, through repeated interaction, through the quiet understanding that has built over time. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels separate. Even the unseen aspects of life remain present. Not in a way that demands attention, but in a way that can be felt if one becomes still enough. A sense that everything is connected, not through visible lines, but through a deeper continuity that does not need to be explained. As the day moves forward, it does not rush toward an end. It simply shifts. Light softens, movement slows, tasks become fewer, not because they are finished, but because they no longer need to continue. The rhythm naturally begins to settle. Evening arrives in the same quiet way as morning. Firelight appears again, steady and soft. People gather, not with intention to create a moment, but because this is where they are drawn at this time of day. The warmth, the presence, the familiarity, all of it continues without needing to be marked. Stories may be shared or not. Words may be spoken, or silence may remain. Both are part of the same rhythm. Neither is required. The world does not depend on constant expression. It continues regardless. The sky darkens slowly. Stars return, just as they have before. Their presence does not change. It remains constant, offering the same quiet sense of distance, of continuity beyond what can be fully understood. People may look up, or they may not. The sky remains either way. Sleep comes again, not as a break, but as part of the same flow. The body rests because it follows the rhythm of the day. The mind slows because it has not been pushed beyond its natural pace. Everything settles without effort, and then, without announcement, the cycle begins again. There is no need to mark the repetition. It is not something separate from life. It is life, each day flowing into the next, each season turning into another, each generation continuing what was already in motion. Nothing stands still, but nothing rushes forward either. It simply continues. And as this quiet continuation moves forward, it begins to soften even more. The details that once felt clear start to blur gently at the edges, not disappearing, but settling into something less defined. The land is still there, the same forests, the same open plains, the same rivers moving steadily across the earth. But now they feel more distant, as if seen through a slower, quieter awareness. The rhythm continues, but it no longer asks to be followed closely. It simply exists, repeating in its own time. Morning light still arrives, but it feels softer now, less distinct. The shift from darkness to light happens without being noticed fully. It is there, and then it has already passed into something else. Movement becomes lighter. Steps are still taken. Paths are still walked, but they no longer carry the same weight of attention. The body moves as it always has, guided by memory, but the mind begins to drift, not focusing on each action, but allowing them to happen on their own. Sounds fade into the background. The wind still moves through the trees. Water still flows along its path. Voices may still rise and fall in quiet conversation, but all of it blends together now, forming a single, continuous presence, rather than separate moments to be noticed one by one. The people remain, but their presence softens. They are no longer the center of attention. They become part of the environment itself, moving through it without standing apart. Their actions continue, but without sharp edges, without clear beginnings or endings, just a steady, quiet motion. Time feels less structured. The sense of one moment leading into another becomes less important. Instead, everything seems to exist at once. Layers of experience overlapping gently, without needing to be separated. The past is not behind. The present is not fixed. The future is not waiting ahead. All of it rests together, quietly. The seasons still turn, but the changes feel slower now, almost unnoticeable. A shift in air, a subtle change in light. The land adjusts, but it does not call attention to these adjustments. They happen naturally, as they always have, without needing to be marked. Food is still gathered, prepared, shared. But these actions no longer stand out. They blend into the rhythm, becoming part of a continuous flow that does not pause for recognition. The same hands move, the same patterns repeat, but they feel lighter, almost effortless. Tools remain where they are needed, used and set aside without thought. They exist within the environment, not as separate objects, but as extensions of the same quiet system. Their purpose continues, but it no longer needs to be noticed. The connections between people soften as well, not disappearing, but becoming less defined. Words are fewer. Silence is longer. Presence is enough. The need to express, to explain, to define, fades into something quieter, something more still. Even the unseen aspects of life begin to dissolve into the background. The sense of connection remains, but it is no longer something that needs to be felt actively. It is simply there, steady, constant, part of everything without needing to be named. As evening returns, it does so without distinction. Light fades, but the change feels seamless. Firelight glows, but softly, blending into the surrounding darkness rather than standing against it. People gather, or perhaps they do not. It becomes harder to tell where one moment ends and another begins. The sky above remains, filled with the same quiet patterns. Stars appear, but they do not draw the eye in the same way. They are part of the stillness now, part of the background that holds everything together without needing to be seen clearly. Sleep comes again, but it feels different now, not as a transition, but as a continuation. The body rests, but the world does not pause. It moves gently, quietly, without interruption. Dreams may come, or they may not. It no longer matters. The rhythm continues either way, and slowly. Even the sense of observing begins to fade. The land remains. The rivers continue to flow. The wind moves without direction. The forests breathe in their own time. Human presence blends completely into the environment. No longer separate, no longer distinct. Everything continues. But nothing stands out. No beginning, no ending. Just a quiet, steady presence, moving beyond what can be followed. And then even that softens